Hi, my name's Craig Gordon. I represent the N.E.A.D Foundation. That stands for Nutrition and Exercise versus Addiction and Disease. Today I'd like to talk about the opioid crisis, the last 8 years, and how bad it's gotten with all the pharmaceuticals that lead to more street heroin. So there's a lot of different aspects to this problem. And one of them that so few people seem to understand is how we were heading into this crisis before we started getting a hold of all these pharmaceutical opioids. And this has been a major problem. Lots and lots of death and carnage all over the United States. And I have to be honest with you and tell you, I don't think the places like Purdue Pharma, Cardinal Health, McKesson, and assorted other manufacturers and distributors are solely responsible for this crisis. I think they are 70 or 80% responsible, and I don't think that we should be allowing them to keep their ill-gotten gains because of how abusive their whole role and their responsibility in it was. So they took advantage of the public, saw a weakness, saw money, hence a while I invented a new word. It was a profitoot. Not a prostitute, a profitoot. And most of these people really don't care how they make their money. This is not, much different part and parcel than good old American corporate business. So ethics are low, and it's all about taking care of the shareholder. So back to the opioids. We can do a whole lot more about it, and we could have prevented it, and we could have done enormous improvements, but nobody wants to get into the nutrition issue. Nobody wants to get into what drives behavior, what caused addiction, where were the underpinnings of addiction before we saw our first cigarette, before we saw our first beer, before we saw our first marijuana cigarettes, before we smoked, I call cigarettes sugarettes, and all of our addictions. It started with soda. My name for soda is soda. And do you think that affects your brain? Absolutely. So the assortment of causative factors that helped cause the opioid crisis were born a lot before we had prescription heroin and Demerol, Dilaudid, Oxycontin, Hydrocodone, Percocet, Percodan. These things have been around a long time. It just got a whole lot worse because addiction is cumulative and progressive. So I put together one sign. I have several others. One says, maybe our swan dive into the opioid heroin epidemic is more about familial dysfunction, learning disorders, emotional and pain and trauma, poor education, living conditions, violence, and malnutrition. And I'd like to add, because again, I'm telling you my truth, is I think it's about suicide. And what could be better than a suicide with no pain at all that you don't even know you're really doing? So oftentimes people commit suicide with heroin and drugs, and they're not aware that that particular high is going to kill them. So frequently I do counseling and lectures and presentations to other professionals. And I brought up methadone programs many times. And when I'm in a room full of counselors and people that work with addicts for years, it's almost like a fist fight. Some people think methadone's great, and some people think it's the worst thing you could do to a recovering person. So many think they should, knuckle down and cold turkey their heroin, or they should wean themselves off it. Many people say, do the methadone and wean yourself off it, but that's not how these clinics work. So, pardon me. So these clinics oftentimes are not invested in getting you off the methadone. They have their rules. Opiate addicts and street addicts oftentimes eventually will not show up on time, or do something stupid, or get arrested, or have a dirty urine, and these people are then told you can't be a part of our methadone program. And what happens then? Within half an hour, they're back on the street looking for heroin. Who knows what they're going to get? They're feeling poorly. They're jonesing for their drugs. They're going through withdrawal symptoms. They're pissed off. They're angry. And somebody, oh, you got some heroin? No problem. Here's some cash. And where are we going to go shoot that drug? Where are we going to go snort that drug? Bing, bang, boom. They're back on the street. And then the next day comes and they don't have money for it. And the methadone program is gone. So, back on the street. What are you going to do to get the money to get the heroin? So this vicious cycle is repeated day in, day out by literally millions of Americans. And taxpayers and their families have to pay for it. Then there's victims of crime. And not a lot of this is rocket science, but we have to take this seriously. We have to get at the root causes of addiction. And once again, I am hoping and pleading with you to consider that the sugar they started with as kids is at the root of their addictions. It even can go back further to what we get in utero from our parents, before, during, and after conception. And then grandma loves you with sugar. And then if you're a good girl or a good boy, you get a treat. If you finish your dinner, you get a treat, or you get dessert. It goes on in America. And this perversion of modifying children's behavior with sugar and treats does nothing but set us up for alcohol and drugs when they get a little older. It has to stop. So my name's Craig Gordon. I'm hoping you will consider the daisy chain or causative factors that lead to opiate abuse, and the controversy around methadone treatment that doesn't seem to work too well. It's methadone maintenance programs, they call them, or it's medicated assisted treatment programs. And for some people that's fine temporarily, but we need to get these people healthy. We need to wean them off methadone. We need to help them start to take better care of themselves, so their brains fire up, so they can get a job and hold a job and show up and do what they're supposed to do. We really need to get these people off cigarettes, vape, and chew, because that is the leading cause of death and relapse in recovery. So overall health is strong enough to get in the ring with addiction and disease. We have to start using those as primary tools. My name's Craig Gordon. Thank you for listening. The N.E.A.D Foundation, N.E.A.D I have books, I have pamphlets, I have brochures, and lots of information to back this up. Thanks.